12 children were killed, at least. We still, I think, don't know the full number of the fatalities from this attack. 34 casualties total, if I recall correctly, between wounded and killed. This is obviously a horrific incident. Um, the other part of it was my initial reaction, is that this could be the spark of the larger war. And I don't think Hezbollah necessarily intended to kill these children. This wasn't a loitering munition. It wasn't a directed weapon, a guided weapon. But the organization took this risk or assumed the risk that they would end up committing an attack like this or committing an incident that would end up like this once they started attacking Israel on October 8th. And there was a preliminary Israeli response yesterday, but remains to be seen if this will be the start of a wider conflagration. But that was my sense that, oh, wow, this could be the thing that sets off that wider war. I don't dismiss the significance of Hezbollah's attacks over the past 10 months. It's a war of attrition. There's no other way to put it. Hezbollah itself has put it as a war of attrition. They have divided Israel's forces along two lines. They've kept them occupied along two fronts. Something like 80,000 Israelis have been displaced from their homes. There's also the image of victory that Hezbollah has scored, given the fact that they've succeeded in creating a security zone, for lack of a better word, inside Israel for the first time. And Israel's retaliatory attacks have not succeeded in putting an end to this situation. So that's pretty significant. It could get much worse from here. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And that's I guess the feared outcome, that this could become a much wider conflagration. There is a lot of pressure. I mean, there are the residents of northern Israel are calling out for some kind of response from the Israeli government. There are these constant statements by residents of the north that they feel abandoned. There have been fake signs put up in the north to signify displeasure by the residents that you're entering Israel's new security zone. It looks like a sign put up by the IDF, but it's not. But these are all signals of displeasure. At the same time, I think societal trust in Prime Minister Netanyahu is at an all-time low, including among the Likud base and right-wing supporters. So the idea that they could trust him to lead the country into a larger conflict, the type of larger conflagration that would be necessary to put an end to this situation, might not be there, given that he's promising blood, sweat, and tears. But unlike Churchill in World War II, he doesn't have the confidence of the Israeli people in the same way. The word success is a little bit tricky because success can exist in a purely theoretical sense. And if you want to address that kind of in isolation from all the other factors that might be brought to bear to put pressure upon the Israelis, it would at least be distancing Hezbollah, that magical 40-kilometer line that we hear about in Lebanon, all the way going back to 1982, distancing the short-range missiles out of range of northern Israel, perhaps destroying Hezbollah's assets south of that 40-kilometer range, south of the Litani River, perhaps a temporary but not long-term occupation of South Lebanon, and a wider assault through standoff firepower, air force, what have you, on Israel's on Hezbollah's longer-range assets. This success, as you mentioned, would have to require a massive ground invasion, because that's the only way to deal with these short-range rockets because of their mobility. But part of this would also be to minimize on the Israeli side the amount of damage that Hezbollah can do to the Israeli home front, and that's expected to be massive, unprecedented damage. I mean, first of all, let's address this nonsensical argument. Let's assume that somehow Hezbollah is trying to liberate the occupied Golan Heights from the rapacious Israelis, their greed and lust for Arab territory. You don't do that by killing Arab children, which is exactly what happened yesterday, murdering 12 Arab children who themselves have responded, by the way, as Israelis, and have demanded of their government as Israelis to be protected from these kinds of attacks, and have demanded that their Israeli government, step in to defend them. They're not asking the Arab world to liberate them or come take care of them. So let's put that aside. How Israelis have responded to this, I would say there's a bit of a shrug in Israel. There's this expectation that the world will always be against them. They've come to just view that as built into how they fight war. Um, there's for better or for worse they've done this, because for better it allows them to kind of ignore the opprobrium, ignore this kind of nonsensical reasoning that we just mentioned, and fight the war as is necessary. On the other hand, there's a big element of this war that is fought in the hearts and minds of the international community and Western audiences. And in conceding the fact a priori that these publics will be set against them, the Israelis have not tried to put their version of events out there. They've not tried to successfully put out a narrative that could sway the hearts and minds in their direction. And rather than have hundreds of thousands of protests in support of Hamas, as we've seen over the past 10 months throughout Western capitals, rather we should be seeing protests supporting Israel. And I think part of that phenomenon is a failure on the Israeli part to try to influence the hearts and minds with what their side of what the story is. There's a huge distance between Israel and Iran. They don't exactly share a border. It's not clear that Israel's military assets can reach Iran safely and return. And I don't think the Israelis themselves are interested in a wider escalation right now. And they can't exactly throw, at least on the governmental level, they can't throw caution to the wind when it comes to international sentiment, because Israel is intimately interlinked with the West. It depends on the West for its, Europe is Israel's largest trade partner. Israel's military edge, its technological edge when it comes to warfare depends on this relationship with the West, joint research and development with Western governments, between Israeli universities and other Western universities. Israel is part of the West, and it doesn't have an alternative. Look, if they're smart, they realize they're not going to have a green light or a carte blanche from either a Democratic administration, which looks like it's shaping up to be a Harris, Vice President Harris-led administration, or from a Donald Trump administration. The left, the Democratic Party, has now a far left constituency as part of its base to which it has to respond, and they're not keen on supporting the Israelis. That's going to be part of any Democratic administration's calculus, even if they have a little bit more wiggle room, given that the election will be over. You also have an isolationist wing growing among the left that does not want to see the United States involved in foreign adventures. And on the right-wing side, you also have corollary constituencies. You have a very far-right, but minimal constituency that is now reviving classical anti-Semitic tropes, particularly when it comes to Israel. They're not too keen on supporting the Israelis. And then you have a growing isolationism within the conservative movement writ large. This is partially why former President Trump, picked J.D. Vance as his running mate to respond to that constituency. So I think a President Trump administration would give the Israelis green light to get the job done in Gaza, but as Trump has said, get it done quickly. He's not a man who's keen on wars in general, or especially not on long wars. He said he wants to get back to the business of making peace deals, and I think that'll be his emphasis. There can also be an element of Israel being perceived among the conservative base as distracting the United States from the more important, broader confrontation with China. The more that perception grows, the more there would be pressure from a Republican administration on the Israelis to keep things contained and to not widen matters into a regional war. So it's not exactly carte blanche from either side. There's going to be pressure points from either side, irrespective of who the next president will be.